Miss Barton, could you put your camera live for me, please? Mr. Hogben, could you put your camera live for me, please? And Mr. Horner, could you put your camera live for me, please? Thank you very much.
Sorry, so you want us on, do you, during the session? Ms. Williams?
I'm just going. I do, yes, please. I want your camera live, please. Yeah, thank you very much. But your sound off. Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's 11:30 and time to open the hearing session for matter 2, which concerns the duty to cooperate. Can I just check, Caroline, that you can see and hear me okay? You're still on mute, Caroline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good morning. Sorry about that. I couldn't get my mouse across the screen quick enough. Yes, we can see and hear you. Thank you very much, Inspector.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Kevin Ward, and along with my colleague Phil Milam, we are the inspectors appointed by the Secretary of State under Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 to carry out the independent examination of the Folkestone and Hythe District Core Strategy Review. The programme officer for the examination is Caroline Williams, and she'll be present for all of the hearing sessions. As Caroline has explained, I think we would prefer it if everyone involved in the session can keep cameras on so that we're all visible on the screen. But if you can have your microphones switched onto the mute facility unless you're speaking. If you don't wish to keep your camera on all of the time, that's fine. And alternatively, you can turn it on when speaking. Further, alternatively, you can just make contributions verbally if you wish. Before we proceed with these opening announcements, can we just ask, first of all, the council representatives and then the other participants to introduce themselves. This just helps us to confirm that everyone can be seen and heard. So if I can turn to the council's representatives first of all.
Yes, sir. My name is Paul Shadarivi. I'm Queen's Counsel, acting for the council.
Thank you.
My name is David Whittington. I am the Strategy and Policy Senior Specialist for the council.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is James Hammond. I'm a Senior Planning Policy Specialist working for the council.
Good morning. Okay. Is that it? I appreciate there are others from the council team in the background, as it were, but we'll bring those in if necessary, but we probably don't need to introduce them at this stage. Any other representatives on the council intending to speak?
Good morning all. My name is Matthew Hogben. I am a Principal Transport and Development Planner for the County Council. I am representing the District Council on highway matters and providing them with advice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Morning. Okay, if we can go through other participants, I'll just take them in the order that we have them. Mr. Horner, first of all.
Yes, Graham Horner. I'm Chairman of Shepway Area CPRE Committee for CPRE Kent.
Thank you. And Mr. Berrant.
Good morning, sir. Mark Berrant from the Home Builders Federation.
Good morning. And Ms. Barton.
And my name is Louise Barton, and I'm a local resident, and also I ran the Lydd Airport Action Group, and still do. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. And Mr. Baker.
Good morning, sir. My name is Jeremy Baker. I'm a resident of Canterbury, and my interest in this matter is concerning the impact of the core strategy review on Canterbury. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Okay, unless I've missed anyone, I think that's all of the participants for the session. As I said, I appreciate there are others from the council in the background, as it were, and I'm sure you'll come in as appropriate. Okay, thank you. So just to remind everyone that the guidance notes were issued initially in May of this year, which provide some general background for the examination and the hearings. All of the documents relevant to the examination are available on the council's website. Additional guidance notes for these virtual hearing sessions were issued more recently, so please bear these in mind, and also bear in mind that the privacy notice that was issued at the same time. An agenda has been produced for the session today, so hopefully you have a copy of that. We'll aim to work through the agenda in a logical order, so if you can please bear with us and just wait until the appropriate point on the agenda to make any comments or raise any questions that you have. Once we've dealt with a particular issue, we will move on and we won't be returning to that particular point. So please make sure you make any comments or raise any issues that you need to as we go through. If we can aim to be as focused as possible when speaking, please try and avoid simply agreeing with other speakers or repeating points that you or others have already made. In terms of the format of the hearing session, it largely will be directing questions to the council. We will, of course, give others participating in the session full opportunity to speak as we go through the agenda. We'll usually give the council the opportunity to respond to any particular comments or points that have been made before we move on. If you can, just make sure you speak only when asked to do so. Unmute your microphone when you want to speak, but otherwise have it muted during the hearing session. And just to emphasize, we'll just have one person speaking at a time. As Caroline has explained, if you do wish to speak or make a point, can you use the raise hand facility? Mr. Horner, you got your hand up? Is it a point you wish to?
I'm sorry, sir, just a technical issue. Out of interest, I'm running the YouTube stream on another machine and it doesn't seem to be working at the moment. So if I can leave that with the program.
Okay,
organizer.
I'll ask Caroline to look into that. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so as I said, if you do wish to raise a point or speak at any point of the agenda, if you can use the raise hand facility. So hopefully you're all familiar with that. Please don't attempt to introduce or share any additional documents during the session. If we do require additional documents or information, we will ask for those, and they should be provided to the programme officer separately outside of the meeting session. If you have any technical difficulties or lose connection during the session, which you can't resolve, please contact the programme officer by alternative means, either phone or email, and I'm sure Caroline will do what she can to assist you.
Mr. Ward, just to confirm, we are live. We are live on live tuning. So, Mr.
Okay.
Horner, I'll resend you the link so you can have a look.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Thank you. If you can ask everyone to make sure your mobile phones and any other devices are switched onto silent mode, please, for the duration of the session. And it's also helpful if you can minimize any other devices that are using Wi-Fi, just to help the connection. We will take a break at an appropriate point in the session. If necessary, we'll see how long things are taking. If we have a break, if you can make sure that your camera and microphone are turned off for the duration of the break, and switch your camera back on when we resume. And if you can make sure that we resume promptly after any break. All of the hearing sessions are being streamed live, hopefully, on the Council's YouTube channel, and that can be accessed via the Council's website. Before we move on, are there any queries from any of the participants in relation to the format for the hearing, or any queries about the technology we're using before we proceed? Everyone's comfortable with the raising hand facility and use of microphones, etc. Any questions about the procedures for the hearing before we move on? No? Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, we'll move on then to the agenda for matter 2, which, as you'll be aware, concerns the duty to cooperate. I think just to stress before we do start in earnest, the duty to cooperate is a very specific legal duty placed on the council in terms of plan preparation. So we will be sticking to that particular aspect of the examination in this particular session. I appreciate that a number of you do have broader concerns also about the soundness of the core strategy review, and later sessions will deal with those particular issues in terms of soundness. But if we can try as much as possible to stick with the actual duty to cooperate, which, as I said, is quite a specific legal duty, which is placed on the council. So thank you. In terms of the questions that we set out earlier in the examination, again, the council have provided a comprehensive response in writing to that. So I think in the interest of moving things forward, we're happy to take certain aspects of that as read, as it were, which I think leaves us with two key areas really to consider during the session this morning. As you can see from the agenda, first of all, the issue of housing needs, housing requirement, and the overall provision of housing, and following on from that, more specifically, issues in relation to the proposed New Garden settlement. So we'll take item 1 first, looking at the issue of housing needs, housing requirements, etc. If I can just ask the council, one of its representatives, first of all, just to, I suppose, give us an overview as you see it in terms of the interrelationships with other authorities, specifically in terms of the identification of housing needs and the housing requirements, insofar that relates to relationships as far as migration and commuting, and indeed wider housing markets are concerned. So, a representative of the council, first of all. Mr. Whittington, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
As the interrelationships, obviously go into more detail in our MIQs, which you've mentioned earlier, but essentially it started back in the Sheppey Andover District Strategic Housing Market Assessment. right from the beginning. We worked with the neighbouring district on that to identify how we would relate to their district as well as other districts. This identified through government data, census information, that the links between us and neighbouring authorities, in particular for the housing market area, were not that great. We did have links with the southern part of Dover, but with neighbouring authorities, with the strategic housing market, that was very weak with regard to with the northern part of Dover, Thanet, Canterbury, and Ashford. Ashford's similar work at that time also indicated that the market area had poor links with ourselves, and furthermore with Rother as well. We had very little linkage with the strategic housing market with that district as well. So essentially it was just ourselves and the southern part of Dover where the housing markets appeared to be forming. In August 2015, further, that same similar situation was confirmed with the travel to work areas as well, which were published by the Office of National Statistics. Again, showing there's some linkage with Southern Dover, but the rest of the neighbouring authorities, there are very few. I think with regard to other issues, service provision and cross authority relationships, these came out, are probably identified clearer in the statements of common ground, which came at a later date. These were particular infrastructure. There's some education crossover with Ashford, for example, transport and rail. There's some relationship with neighbouring authorities there, water supply, conservation, enhancement, natural environment was limited. Recreational pressures, we heard in the earlier session with regard to the Dungeness area. There's a lot of recreation coming from other areas there. And obviously flood risk as well. We've got some joint flood risk down in the marsh. But yeah, the overall sort of issues which came forward. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of housing requirements, the situation, we talked about this earlier in brief, but given the standard methodology and the process of identifying local housing needs, which is clearly a different approach than it would have been in the past in terms of looking at wider housing markets. To what extent has that affected how the council has cooperated with other authorities in terms of the housing requirement figure specifically?
Okay, we have obviously been carrying out due to cooperate meetings with our neighbouring authorities right from the start, back in 2016, as set out in the due to cooperate document, which is EB, EB 1.80. There's a table at the back which sets out all the meetings we've had. But yes, I mean, as part of that process, through the discussions with them and the new housing figures, we all felt that we could meet our own need within that, within our documents.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We'll perhaps come back to that final point in a moment. But in terms of the mechanics of engagement with those other authorities, you mentioned there in terms of meetings, but perhaps you could just give an overview of the actual processes that were involved. So, for example, in terms of liaison between officers or members of relevant authorities. Yeah.
Yes, at those various meetings, we had specific one-to-one meetings with officers and members at the beginning to see when we were first looking at the numbers and the proposals we were looking for. We also had, we have quarterly meetings with officers during each quarter to discuss issues on housing and also other issues which could be cross-border. I think my colleague's just going to add to that as well. Sorry.
Just to supplement Mr. Whittington's comment, so the duty to cooperate statement, which is document reference EB01 spot 80, clearly sets out how the organisations that were involved in duty to cooperate discussions were engaged with constructively, actively, and on an ongoing basis in terms of housing need, the housing requirement, and on housing provision. In Appendix 1 to that statement details and records all meetings that have taken place. So consultation responses that were received from statutory authorities and bodies also helped to shape the emerging versions of the core strategy review, and they've separately assisted in shaping the site allocation policies that have been that are in play in terms of delivering the housing requirement for the district over the plan period. So in 2019, when the revised housing need methodology was published by government, the District Council worked proactively under the Statement of Common Grounds to effectively bring that conversation in check with the revised housing requirements. And that information is duly set out in each Statement of Common Ground under the housing requirement.
Okay. Thank you. So in terms of the outcome of that cooperation with other authorities on specifically on the matter of the housing figure, the housing requirement, as you've pointed out, there are a series of statements of common ground between yourselves and other authorities. The principal, I suppose, principal conclusion to be drawn from that is that there are no issues in terms of unmet housing need in either direction, as far as you and the other authorities are concerned.
That is correct, sir. Yes, absolutely.
And just to supplement that point, sir, the Statements of Common Ground involved considerable effort at the back end of 2018 into 2019, and they were duly entered into with each of the organisations in turn. Having received the question from the inspectorate as part of the examination, we revisited the conversation with our neighbouring authorities. So we put the question of housing need to them, and each of those authorities responded in turn to say that they could meet their own need within their own boundaries, and that is set out under paragraph 1 spot 30 of the Matter 2 response dated July 2020.
Sorry, can you give me the paragraph reference again there?
1.30.
Okay, yeah.
So each of the authorities responded in turn, and the summarised conclusion from that re-engagement was that each of the neighbouring authorities could meet their own need, and likewise so could the Folkestone Hythe District Council.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berendt from the Home Builders Federation.
Thank you, sir. And just in terms of the last statement by the council, in terms of that each authority can meet their own needs, from the council's own evidence, it would suggest that Rother are having a particular difficulty in meeting their own needs and actually won't be able to meet their own needs on the basis of their current local plan. It's one of the reasons why they are looking to review their local plan, and will be taking that forward, obviously, by 2021 at the earliest for their Regulation 18 consultation. So there's some significant period of time where Rother will not be meeting its own needs, as we've set out in our statements there. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there's maybe a difference between being asked to contribute towards meeting some of those unmet needs and whether or not there are unmet needs. And I think that might be the distinction to be made here, sir. I think we recognise that there is a weak link in terms of migration between and commuting between Rother and Folkestone and Hythe, but I think it still requires, as part of paragraph 60, for the council to consider any needs in neighbouring areas. So I think there is an unmet need and one that should have been considered. I think on the whole, I think looking at the nature of the cooperation, it's more a case of our concern is around the effectiveness of that cooperation, and that probably moves into the Matter 3 discussion. So I don't really want to sort of dwell on the point, but I think there are unmet needs, and there are unmet needs that are likely to grow within Rother, if the case is with the new standard methodology coming forward, which increases there from 730 to 1,173 homes per annum. So I think there is a distinction, there is a concern there, and one that needs to be recognised and addressed by the council. So.
Thank you. Just on that particular point, in terms of Rother District Council's position, have Mr. Brown, to your knowledge, have they reached a definite conclusion that they're unable to meet all of their own needs, or is it still something they're considering whether they can or not? Mr. Barron, yeah.
Apologies, sir. You went on me there. Sorry, you all froze, and I didn't catch anything of what you just said. Sorry, my
I'll just
connection is unstable. Apologies for that.
No problem. I'll just go through that again. Yeah, it was just coming back on the point you made, really, in terms of Rother District Council's position. Have they reached the stage where they have definitely concluded rather that they can't meet all of their own needs, or is it still something that they're working through?
Well, I think they're working through to that, but at the moment, on the position they have with their current local plan, there are unmet needs on the basis of the current standard method. So their plan is out of date, so those are unmet needs. Moving forward, whether they then address those unmet needs, so these are needs that are present now that need to be addressed, and it shouldn't be about pushing it back to another plan and a future plan review. And I think that comes back to PPG in terms of paragraph 61022, which states that inspectors will be expected to see strategic policymaking authorities having addressed key strategic matters through effective joint working and not defer them to subsequent plan updates. So it's about meeting needs now rather than deferring those to future updates and future plans. So it's how is the council working with Rother and other authorities in this wider area to address those unmet needs, to ensure that they don't just get forgotten about when we move to a future plan period. And I think that's our concern, sir. And it's whether I think there has been engagement. So whether it's actually a element of soundness in terms of the effectiveness of the approach going forward, or whether it's a duty to cooperate matter, I think it is unclear in my mind at the moment. But I think it's definitely unmet needs are there, and they need to be considered by the council. Okay.
In terms of the duty to cooperate and this current core strategy review, is that something that you think is your position, that the council has failed the duty as far as this plan is concerned, or is it something perhaps that would need to be addressed from the other direction, I suppose, from the preparation of the Rother local plan?
I think it's difficult seeing so often plans fail to actually engage with this issue effectively across the country, and I think that's one of the reasons why the duty to cooperate is looking to be got rid of, as it were. I think in this plan, having looked at all the evidence, I think they probably have undertaken the duty to cooperate in terms of the legal aspects, and I think our concerns are probably more around the soundness of that and how it can be considered going forward, and whether there needs to be an early review on the basis of Rother's position, or indeed any other authority moving forward. So it's whether there's that early review, sir, is as a necessity as part of that. I think I'll consider more about the soundness and whether the effectiveness of that cooperation, not necessarily whether the legal position in terms of that has taken place. So a slightly different position, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sharavian. You're still on mute there.
Sorry.
That's okay.
We've got to get a sense of perspective on the Rother issue. Its local plan was adopted late 2014. its level of housing need will now have to be determined by the standard method. Now they have started work, and none of this is any criticism of Rother. It's where they are at the moment. Their position with respect to meeting need has not changed, despite the work that's ongoing. And they are undertaking early engagement on the local plan in the lead up to their Regulation 18 consultation expected later in 2021. So they are well behind the curve, so to speak, in terms of the preparation of this plan and their plan. And it's therefore still in the process of developing its evidence base. Now, that of course means that whatever they might speculate about meeting their own needs, at the moment, their evidence base has yet to be perfected, and we just do not know what their situation is going to be at the end of the day. So in terms of the duty, quite clearly, this is not a Sevenoaks type situation. There has been ongoing discussion at the very early stages of plan formulation, so far as we are concerned. And Rother's position, as with other local authorities' position, neighbouring authorities' position, has been constant and consistent throughout the process. We cannot, as it were, bat a ball towards a target we cannot see or know about at this stage. So that's where we are. There can be no doubt at all that we have complied with the duty to cooperate, and I would go further and say actually that our approach to housing need and meeting it is entirely in that context, but that's for another discussion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berent, do you want to come back on any of those points?
Sorry, sir. I'm freezing, so I didn't catch the last points of Mr. Shalaravian's point. So apologies. It was about the last 30 seconds. So I don't. But I think I got the gist in terms of the position with regard to Rother. I think the situation is that what they're delivering now is lower than the what's required under the standard method, and their plan is currently out of date. So that is the position that is known going forward in terms of what their delivery is over the next 3 years. What they deliver in future is a position that isn't known, but there is an unmet need now, and that has been identified by the council in terms of what Rother are delivering and what their actual needs are on the basis of the standard method and what they're required to assess in terms of the 5-year land supply and all those aspects. So I think those are where the position I'm coming from, and I think that's our position, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any further points anyone wishes to make specifically about the duty to cooperate in relation to housing requirements? Mr. Horner.
Yes, excuse me. Item 1 on the agenda is headed housing need, but our concern is appears to be very little cooperation on the issue of employment and where that will be. We don't disagree with the proposition that each district will take care of its own housing need, but I had considerable difficulty with the concept that there is no kind of overlap between Folkestone, Hythe and Ashford. I mean, Mr. Whittington is asking us to believe that basically the M20 doesn't exist. I know from personal experience, if I'm working somewhere up down the M20 or transport corridor, I will be looking for houses, maybe in Dover, maybe in Folkestone and Hythe, maybe in Ashford. And certainly, if that matter of where people are going to work, who are going to live in this wonderful new town, is not addressed as between the districts, then it's going to have huge repercussions, we would say, for transport conditions. And we couldn't find any conversation with neighbouring districts about where people are going to commute to. I'm sure Mr. Baker will be able to give us some more information about that.
Okay, is that just, sorry, Mr. Horner, is that specifically in relation to the employment implications of the new garden settlement itself? We can come on to that in a moment.
Well, it's the new garden settlement and the rest of the development that's going on in Folkestone Hythe. And there is a deficit of jobs in Folkestone Hythe. They've admitted that. So it does mean there's going to be a significant amount of out commuting. Okay. Where is the commuting going to be to? Okay.
Can I ask, presumably Mr. Whittington or one of his colleagues, just to respond to that particular question? I suppose the interrelationship between employment and jobs growth and commuting patterns, etc. How has that been taken into account in terms of cooperation?
It has been discussed. Again, it's very much that we are looking at providing our own employment opportunities within our districts. I just highlight that the 2011 census data did indicate that 49% of the population does actually work and live in the district, 11% work from home, and 20% commute less than 2 kilometres away. Only 10% commute to Ashford, and 5% to Dover, and 4% to London. So we have got employment opportunities within the district. We have employment land allocated. We have existing employment land identified and safeguarded to meet the future requirements. The otter pool itself, this garden settlement itself, that's considered, I mean, from the information we've been available to see and look at, and that seems to consider that the size of the population growth overall in otter pool should be fairly self-sufficient, and that it's substantial enough that residents should be able to serve the needs of businesses in terms of the labour market and vice versa. It concludes, I mean, this is the Otter Pool Park Employment Lands Need Assessment, which is in the evidence base EB 0720. And that concludes that the level of net commuting is potentially low. I mean, it is obviously a document which is looking to the future, but with the current change in working habits as well, many working from home, we feel the commuting should be, as it is now, fairly minimal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horner, is there anything you want to respond on what's just been said?
Well, we can argue later about whether or not these aspirations for keeping commuting to a minimum will come to fruition. But this session is about whether or not the council has properly addressed these issues with its neighbours. And as I say, we couldn't find anything in the statements of common ground about employment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Baker wants to come in there. Mr. Baker, do you want to unmute your microphone? Thank you.
Sorry, sir, for being a little slow with these controls. I did just want to make the point, sir, although employment is not my principal concern here, that Canterbury is a very significant retail and commercial and also educational hub for the whole of East Kent. And a significant amount of the traffic coming in to Canterbury is based on people working in the city, people shopping in the city, and also people coming to the 3 universities in the city, and they do come from all over East Kent. So just to deal with Mr. Horner's suggestion that there will be travel from the district to Canterbury, I think that is right, and I think it is borne out by the evidence such as it is on transport impacts in Canterbury. I don't want to dwell on that any further, sir, but just to make that point. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you. Just Mr. Whittington, just bringing you back in from the council's point of view, just to answer that question from Mr. Horner, really, in terms of specific cooperation with other authorities on the issue of employment growth and employment implications for housing growth associated with it. You can just outline what's taken place there in terms of the mechanics of that cooperation and what the outcome of it has been.
Again, it's through the quarterly meetings with our neighbours, going through the issues which are of any concern. Also the one-to-one meetings we've had, and then further the work which my colleague James Hammond has undertaken with the statements of common ground. I would point to the fact that paragraph 20A of the NPPF does refer to those matters that, you know, for statements of common ground that are strategic and are should be made for the plan. But for statements of common ground, it's up to the relevant authorities to raise the issues that were of concern, and the issues of employment were not raised as a major issue. So that was basically the outcome through the talks we've had with our neighbouring authorities. Employment was not again, we could meet our own needs with the employment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, sir, if I may, the authority itself is by no means an inward-looking authority. We understand that there are commuting patterns that cross boundaries, and that's the same as a two-way. That's a two-way flow. To make the point on retail movements are typically outside of the peak periods for highway movements. So typically the retail peak will be a Friday evening and or Saturday and Sunday. So in terms of attributing highway impact to retail movements and also leisure, they are typically outside of the more usual employment-based journeys to work, to and from work. Ordinarily, those journeys are undertaken weekday 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. With return flows 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Although Mr. Hogben will no doubt advise that there are now what's called shoulders to the peak. So the peaks are now spreading because people's working habits are changing and flexing. So the shoulders to the peak now extends that to an hour and a half or thereabouts in both the morning and the afternoon periods. The turning attention back to the council's evidence, under paragraph 1.44 of the July 2020 submission, the council was well aware that the employment land reviews undertaken in 2011 and 2017, they recognise that the stock in the district is somewhat of an older vintage and in need of improvement. And the point to stress here is that the garden settlement offers the opportunity for a bespoke range of employment uses to begin to emerge and grow alongside a new resident population. Economic development colleagues are already having positive discussions with businesses that have become established within the district that want space to grow and relocate to modern purpose-built facilities. So whilst in the sense it's anecdotal, because of where Otterpool is in terms of, we're talking at the strategic level here, but there is a planning application that is coming forward, and we can still a degree of confidence in terms of the economic opportunities and employment opportunities within the sites, notwithstanding also other opportunities, for example, service jobs that might have employment outside of the usual Monday to Friday 9 to 5, as well as education, healthcare, and such like. So just to really hit home the point that Otterpool is of a scale where there is a good degree of internalisation of job opportunities.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barton.
I mean, this is really from a point of soundness, from someone looking from outside. I mean, taking up some of the points made by Mr. Horton, and also from reading the duty to cooperate statements from Ashford Borough Council. I mean, you can actually feel the seething anger. It appears that there's huge competition between Otterpool and Ashford. These things haven't been resolved, and to the extent the documentation is actually given, the appendices were not actually appended to the duty to cooperate, so I'm not actually aware of all the detail. But the whole thing seems entirely illogical. There is no doubt that Ashford has a massive connection with the whole of the area through the M20. And to say it can be totally confined, particularly with regard to housing, is completely, well, as I said, illogical. And I don't believe the council has resolved the issues with Ashford. The extent of the information that's come out from the duty to cooperate, there are still issues that haven't been resolved with regard to competition on the retail front, and particularly with employment. So what it looks as though is that Shepway has made up its mind that it wants Otterpool Park, and has not taken into consideration many of the issues that have been put forward, and also many of the concerns that have been raised by many of the associated boroughs, such as Canterbury and Ashford.
Okay, thank you. We have moved, perhaps not surprisingly, into a number of points specifically in relation to the new garden settlement. So I think we'll move on, unless there are any more general points to be made from the council, or indeed others, as far as the issue of housing requirements and cooperation are concerned. If not, we'll move on specifically to issues of cooperation in relation to the new garden settlement itself.
Not from us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, just a note before we do move on to that. It is difficult, and there is a considerable deal of overlap in terms of the issues that concern people. But if we can attempt at least to stick with the duty to cooperate aspects in relation to the new garden settlement, rather than more specifically issues of soundness, for example. Okay, so in terms of the new garden settlement, again, if the council could just explain, first of all, what particular issues, what particular strategic matters have been raised by that proposal, and just explain how you've engaged with other authorities and indeed other organisations in relation to those issues. So get the council to come in on that one.
Yes, thank you, sir. I set out in the core strategy review inspectors matter into matter 2, dated July 2020. Matters raised as having the potential to impart cross-boundary issues were discussed in turn between officers of the district council and officers of neighbouring authorities under the duty to cooperate. There's a fairly lengthy table that names each authority in turn, and then also lists out one by one the strategic cross-boundary issues. So housing is common to all discussions, so no need to repeat that one. But Ashford Borough Council raised the issue of transportation under the heading of road and rail, education, drainage, wastewater, phasing of infrastructure and retail. Rother raised conservation and enhancement of the natural environment. Dover raised infrastructure as a general heading with rail and water supply. Canterbury raised the matter of transportation with consideration of highway capacity and air quality. Kent County Council raised, not surprised, transport, but under the headings of road and rail, but also sustainable travel, education, social care, public health and prevention services, community and leisure services, public realm, water, wastewater and drainage, minerals, waste management, public rights of way, heritage, biodiversity and environment, digital infrastructure, meaning broadband, energy, air quality and phasing of infrastructure. The Environment Agency raised the matter of flood risk, water resources and groundwater and contaminated land. And then, as introduced in this morning's session under matter 1, there have been statements of common ground entered into with Natural England, dealing with the matter of nutrient neutrality, and it's associated impact on a European site. So that provides a précis summary of the matters of cross-boundary nature, and in effect how the district council has gone about discussing those points in turn with our neighbours and other statutory bodies. And there are a number of modifications that are proposed for your consideration, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So in terms of how those issues have been addressed, you made reference there to the statements of common ground, and in some cases some suggested modifications. But are there any? Can you point to any examples of, I suppose, how the core strategy review has been influenced over its preparation as a result of those discussions? So is there anything in the submitted document which is a direct result of that cooperation and engagement with those other authorities?
Yes, thank you, sir. So there is as an example, there is an amendment proposed for policy CSD5, the water strategy, to take on board Natural England's comments that relate to impact on Stodmarsh SPA, European designated site. There's a proposed modification in respect of retail that came about through discussions with Ashford Borough Council, and it forms part of the statement of common ground with Ashford Borough Council. There's also proposed revisions to some of the transport requirements that fit with the garden settlement to take account of the need for monitor and manage approach to transport mitigation. So thorough and robust assessment in terms of taking on board the direct and specific impacts of the garden settlement, and they're duly recorded within our evidence submitted to the examination.
But in terms of the time period prior to submission, which is the relevant period as far as the duty to cooperate is concerned, are there examples you can point to in terms of, I suppose, constructive cooperation that's that would have influenced what the submitted plan itself says? I appreciate there's been continued work with other authorities and the statements of common ground and modifications, but in terms of what was submitted and the process that led to it, can you give any examples of how that cooperation has been effective with other authorities?
Thank you, sir. If you don't mind, I'll quickly take conference with my colleague, Mr. Whittington. So I'll just put on mute for 1 moment. Thank you.
I think this is the equivalent of passing someone a note over the desk, isn't it?
I think what we need to do is review the Regulation 18 responses from our neighbours. And so this is not something I like doing normally for examination purposes, but to say we would provide you with a note. Yeah. But
it wasn't intended to be a trick question. It was
no,
really
no, of course
just
not.
just to get an idea really of how effective that cooperation has been.
Absolutely. I perfectly understand why you asked the question, sir. I think we need to look at the Regulation 18 responses. Insofar as there were any cross-boundary issues of a strategic nature that should have affected it, we'll see to what extent actually they were raised, and if they were raised the way they were dealt with. I think probably it's unlikely that there was very much, but we'll certainly go through that and not give you an evaluation, but a factual recount of the responses and how they were reflected in the drafting over time.
Yeah, that'd be useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I suppose bringing us up to date in terms of the situation with the submitted core strategy review and indeed work that's continued. But as we understand it, looking at the statements of common ground, etc., there are no outstanding issues of concern from other authorities in relation to the New Garden settlement proposal, obviously subject to some specific issues to be dealt with potentially through modifications, but in terms of the principle, there aren't any outstanding concerns from other authorities about the proposal in the sense of cooperation.
No, not at all, sir. There's great unanimity.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Horner.
I don't know whether you're going to move on to it, sir, but there's a matter, the elephant in the room here appears to be Affinity Water. And as a statutory body, they're not used to raising concerns about anything other than bleating to the government that they need more money because their statutory duty is to provide water where it's asked for. But we are very concerned on the matter of duty to cooperate that they haven't been fully informed about the impact of not just Hospital Park, but all of the other. I mean, Hospital Park is only a third of getting on for half of the total requirement until 2037. So there's a considerable number of houses planned to be built within this plan period. And it wasn't clear to us from the documents submitted that they've been fully appraised of what they will have to provide if this goes ahead. And as I said earlier this morning, the situation appears to be critical, and that within, well, maybe even my lifetime, we're going to run out of water in the southeast of England, and we're going to have to make it from seawater, which is, as far as I'm concerned, totally unsustainable. But in terms of whether the duty to cooperate has been properly discharged, we couldn't find the evidence for that in the documents that were submitted to you.
Okay, thank you. If I can just bring, I think probably Mr. Hammond back in on that particular point, I suppose associated wider point. Can you just explain how the council has cooperated with Affinity Water as a specific example, but also more widely as far as infrastructure providers are concerned in relation to the New Garden settlement?
Yes, thank you, sir. As part of the work that was done to work with these providers in terms of understanding and defining the infrastructure needs to cater for the garden settlement, the District Council provided full information in terms of the trajectory expected in relation to housing delivery at the garden settlement. Also provided details of other site allocations proposed to come forward as part of the core strategy review, to include those site policies that would effectively be rolled forward from the 2013 adopted core strategy. Supplement to that, we also provided information relating to places and policies site allocations that refer to our recently adopted places and policies local plan. So in effect, Affinity Water and other providers had the full set of information in respect of what housing sites are coming forward, where are they located spatially across the district, and at what rate will they deliver. We provided that full suite of information to the providers. On the point of Affinity Water, notwithstanding the effort that was entered into regarding the Statement of Common Ground, Affinity were also doing work to prepare their water resources management plan. So for the Dower region, which is the only supply area that is covered by Affinity in this part of the southeast of England, again, there was extensive consultation and exchange of information relating to the future supply demands that Affinity would have to take account of in their water resources management plan to 2080. I can't speak on Affinity's behalf. I would trust they would have done the same exercise with neighbouring Dover. And water supply was an issue that was covered under the duty to cooperate discussions and the Statement of Common Ground between the District Council and Dover. So in terms of coverage, fully considered, very, very detailed. They had the full suite of information, and likewise other infrastructure providers have been furnished with a similar amount of data.
And again, just to confirm, from your perspective, there are no outstanding issues from Affinity Water or indeed other infrastructure providers in relation to the New Garden settlement?
No outstanding matters in relation to Affinity Water and other infrastructure providers, save for the fact that there are discussions with Highways England in relation to an update to the Statement of Common Ground to deal with Matter 5, which sits on a different day on the examination programme. Excellent progress has been made in relation to Matter 5. We've had verbal agreement that the statement will be entered into, with written confirmation to follow. It's being chased every day. We expect that to be before Matter 5 sits on Thursday. Likewise, an exhaustive amount of technical work done in relation to Matter 7 and the Statement of Common Ground update with Highways England. Great progress has been made. There's touch-based meetings every week. The full sharing of reporting and modelling output, and we're at the end of that process now. A Statement of Common Ground has been drafted and circulated to parties. And we are highly confident that will be entered into before Matter 7 sits at examination in the new year.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Horner, is there anything you want to respond to there?
Well, 2 points, if I may, sir. One is that in common with all of these plans, the core strategy review has been going on in parallel with Affinity Water's work. I think Affinity Water started with their strategic plan before the core strategy review took off. It was by no means clear to us whether or not in the first draft of Affinity Water's plan, Otterpool Park clearly wasn't included. I say Otterpool Park, I mean the revised housing requirement that the council has been working on for this core strategy review. Mm-hmm. It appears to us that there's constantly been a mismatch between the council's aspirations and Affinity Water kind of catching up with them. And in particular, I couldn't find any evidence that they've been appraised of the latest update to the housing requirement, which was consulted on late 2019. The evidence base doesn't seem to indicate there's been any contact since then with Affinity Water. And although Mr. Hammond says they've been provided with all the relevant information, it would be nice to, if you could point me to that in the evidence base, as to exactly which figures were provided to Affinity Water, so that they could then come back and confirm that they'd taken it into their planning.
Okay. The Statement of Common Ground does appear, on the face of it at least, to reflect the most up-to-date figures. Is that correct, Mr. Hammond?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Have I misread it? Because that appeared to be the numbers for Otterpool Park, as opposed to the overall numbers for the district.
Okay. The table 2.1 of that Statement of Common Ground it has the specific figure for the New Garden settlement, but it does also total up other aspects of housing supply.
I'm afraid I should have had it on my screen, shouldn't
That's
I?
That's okay. Don't worry.
Can you point?
I'm quite impressed that I've got it on my screen. So there we go. So it's document.
Incorporate.
Yeah, document EB 13.60.
Thank you.
Yeah.
EB.
But don't worry, you can find that later.
If I find it and I'm still confused, then if I
Okay.
may come back. So.
Okay, but perhaps, Mr. Hammer, just to clarify that, as I can see the statement of common ground, it does appear in table 2.1 to have a breakdown of housing provision across the whole district, including the new garden settlement, and it gives a total figure which it seems from the statement of common ground that Affinity Water have taken that into account.
Yes, that's correct, sir. So it's not only growth at Otterpool, it's other growth across the plan period.
Yeah.
As expressed under table 2.1, as you say.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. If you want to take time, Mr. Horner, to look at that document, if you do spot anything that still raises concern, just let me know by raising your hand as we go through. But okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir.
It's okay.
I will come back if I've got anything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Barton, just to come in now.
Yes, I'd like to just go over the issue of Stone Street. I've looked through all the evidence on the duty to cooperate. This is a subsidiary road network, and I'm sure this will come up in the AONB section. But Stone Street, which is the B2068, runs from effectively from the junction 11 to Canterbury. There's absolutely no evidence about how this road is going to be affected by the construction of Otterpool Park. I mean, the duty to cooperate statement concentrates very much on the impact on Canterbury. I think it's is it Nackington Road and the old Dover Road junction. So it looks at the junctions within Canterbury, but there's nothing to address what is going to happen to that road. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful roads in Kent and probably one of the most beautiful roads in England. It's running through the AONB. It's an old Roman road. There's absolutely nothing to address this issue. And indeed, many of the other transport issues around the back of Hythe, there's no evidence. From the evidence I've seen, unfortunately, some of the appendices to these duties to cooperate stations are not there. But these are very, very important issues and they haven't been addressed.
Okay. Thank you.
The road, by the way, is the B2, it's the official road for Stone Street is the B2068. I'm sure it will come up in the AONB section. But.
Yeah. Okay. I know Mr. Baker has particular issues and concerns in relation to transport matters and relationship with Canterbury. We'll come onto that in a moment. But again, if I can just come back to the council representatives, just in terms of transport implications, transport infrastructure, and indeed transport impacts of the new garden settlement, how has that been addressed through cooperation with relevant authorities?
Thank you, sir. At the start of the process, the District Council appointed consultants, AECOM, to undertake strategic transport modelling to support the emerging core strategy review. The methodology that was agreed with both Highways England and Kent County Council in relation to such matters as trip rates generated by the garden settlement, assignment onto the network, those kind of key modelling criteria, they were all agreed as part of the scoping. The County Council and Highways England were also, they were shared with versions of the technical reporting. They've been part of the conversation throughout the process. Then with the emergence of the garden settlement in relation to its outline planning application, it provided an opportunity for the transport assessment work, also supplemented some of the work that has been undertaken by AECOM. So in effect, we had a strategic overview that is wholly appropriate for plan making, but then we also had further technical submissions that are more akin to a development management type scenario that provided that extra layer of detail, and key information has been uploaded as part of our evidence base. And since the submission made by Highways England to the examination in July, there's been further technical work that has been undertaken, fully in conversation with Highways England and also Kent County Council in terms of the methodological assumptions, and Kent have been furnished with the output reporting and kept abreast of progress. So in effect, it's been a whole package of highway modelling work. Kent County Council have obviously reviewed the plan as it has been emerging through Regulation 1819 and through the Statement of Common Ground. They've sought some minor amendments that have been put to the examination.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps it's a good opportunity to bring Mr. Hogbin in from the County Council. From your perspective, from the County Council's perspective, in terms of cooperation, are you satisfied that there's been adequate and effective cooperation in terms of the new garden settlement? I guess particularly on highway and transport issues.
Yes, thank you, sir. The County Council have had significant discussions with the District Council, obviously prior to the core strategy review going for examination. Mm-hmm. The discussions have taken place over a number of years now. This started discussions as part of the ACON review that Mr. Hammond has previously talked about. As part of that review, a RAG rating, or a red, amber and green rating, was done of key junctions within the Folkestone and Hythe districts and also within the Ashford district, obviously to assess the impact of the core strategy review and the Otterpool Park site on the local highway network and also the strategic network. From that, obviously, the work went into the infrastructure delivery plan, obviously, which accompanies the core strategy review, to set out key junctions that need to be mitigated, obviously, as part of the core strategy review and the Otterpool Park development. Since that date, obviously, we have had discussions with the site promoters at Otterpool Park and their transport consultants at Hythe to scope the required transport assessment that was submitted back in March 2019. We have made quite significant comments on the transport assessment that was submitted. However, we have made significant progress with Arcadis and Folkestone and Hythe District Council, such that there are a number of minor issues that need to be addressed. But in the main, we are prepared to accept that there are no likely to be significant highway impacts from the proposed development at Otterpool Park. Thank you, sir.
Okay. But in terms of the legal duty to cooperate, you raise or have raised no concerns from the County Council's perspective in terms of the engagement that's taken place with the District Council?
Yes, that is correct, sir. Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just final point, Mr. Hogbin. In terms of the nature of evidence that's been prepared in support of the preparation of the core strategy review, particularly on the new garden settlement, I take the point that obviously there are always going to be some detailed issues to deal with, but you're satisfied that the work that was undertaken has been done to a proper methodology. It's been comprehensive and it's covered all the issues that you would expect to be covered.
Yes, sir. If I could go back to the ACON review that was undertaken back in 2016. Yep. For all of obviously the junctions that were part of the assessment, local junction modelling counts were undertaken, and the impacts obviously of those key junctions were assessed based on obviously the projected housing demand associated with the core strategy review. Mm-hmm. This then led to a RAG rating of all the key junctions. Basically, a red means a junction's going to be operating over capacity. Mm-hmm. An amber rating is when it's operating within theoretical capacity, but might be operating slightly over practical capacity. Or green, it's truly operating within capacity. So that led obviously to a list of key projects that have been identified in the infrastructure delivery plan associated with the core strategy review. Mr. Hammond should be able to confirm whereabouts that is available. And obviously through the Otterpool Park planning application, those key junctions have been assessed in further details, and mitigation measures obviously have currently been identified as part of that review. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barton, do you wish to respond at all on that?
It's all very well looking at junctions. If you're looking at some of these narrow roads, including Stone Street, which is the A20 or B2068, it can barely cope with the traffic at the moment. And so how is this going? How is this sort of road going to cope with the Garden City? It just seems completely illogical. There must be more to the assessments than just looking at the roads. I'm sure you've been down the Stone Street and you've seen it, particularly in bad weather. It's a nightmare of a road. So how is that going to cope? And I don't think any of these things have been addressed properly. I think a few traffic assessments around the junctions, and that seems to have come out in the common ground statement with Canterbury, but it's much more than that. And it's more than just the safety element. It's also the fact that the Stone Street, which is part of the AONB, will have massive visual impacts. You'll have to widen roads. It's going to do huge amounts of damage to that as well. And these things haven't been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As I say, we're perhaps inevitably straying a little bit into wider issues of soundness and the principle of the proposal, which we'll definitely be coming back to in later sessions in terms of concerns about impacts on transport, along with other concerns. Mr. Hogben, do you wish to reply to any points there? You have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, sir. If I could just briefly comment on Ms. Barton's comments about the impact on Stone Street. In the County Council's mind, the impact from Stone Street is mainly related to the impact of the Otterpool Park development. All of the other site allocations within the Folkestone Hythe district are further east, and most of them are unlikely to route via Stone Street to get towards Canterbury. In terms of the impact of the Otterpool Park site on Stone Street, the highway trip distribution that was undertaken for the planning application stated that there would be about 6% impact. So that's 6% of the traffic impact in terms of external trips from the Otterpool Park site would go along Stone Street towards Canterbury. In the County Council's view, that's not significant. There is plenty of spare capacity within Stone Street currently. However, obviously there are stresses within the junctions at the end of Stone Street as it goes up towards Nackington Road, as Mr. Baker has pointed out. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Again, I don't want to get too embroiled in the detail in terms of potential impacts. We try and just keep to the issue of duty to cooperate as much as possible. We'll come back to that. Okay, I'll bring Mr. Baker in at this point. We have some particular concerns about wider implications. Yep.
Thank you very much, sir. I will seek to stay on the issue of the duty to cooperate, as you say. Other parties have helpfully confirmed to the examination the key role that the B2068 will play in bringing traffic, particularly from Otterpool into Canterbury. Stone Street is one of the half-dozen Roman roads that feeds into the centre of Canterbury, which is at its origin a Roman city, and radial routes converge on the city centre, which is an area of significant traffic congestion, has been part of an air quality management area since 2006. Which has been widened on a couple of occasions since then because of worsening traffic and pollution conditions. And the ring road in the centre of Canterbury is at capacity. Now, just to deal with the junction at the end of Stone Street, which has been referred to, that's known as junction 44 in the transport assessment work that's been referred to. It is where Stone Street meets the Old Dover Road. Or rather where the B2068, which actually veers off Stone Street, goes into the Old Dover Road, the Old Dover Road being one of the other Roman roads that came into Canterbury from Dover before the new Dover Road was built in the 18th century. And that junction is at capacity now. The figures that have been modelled show that it is at an RFC of 99.4%, rising to 100.7%. So there would appear on the face of it to be an impact that needs to be mitigated. And I'd like to make clear to the examination that I don't have any concerns with the common ground position between the council and Kent County Council, which is contained in the statement of common ground that was signed between those two authorities, I think on the 2nd of March, and contains, in my view, very appropriate recognition in paragraphs 2.18 and 2.66 that highway junctions adversely affected upon, by Otterpool Park Garden Settlement shall be upgraded stroke improved to provide additional capacity, and the design, timing and so on to be subject to agreement between the promoter and KCC as highway authority. That seems entirely appropriate to me. That is reiterated. That's from 2.18 of the Statement of Common Ground. It's reiterated in 2.66. The timely delivery and phasing of critical infrastructure is critical, and the details to be resolved during the Section 106 process for Otterpool Park. And that seems to me absolutely right, sir. What then seems to have gone wrong is the cooperation with Canterbury City Council, because the Statement of Common Ground, which is EB 13.40 with Canterbury City Council, seems to trespass into the area which is properly the remit of the County Council in terms of highway infrastructure capacity issues within Canterbury, and purports to state between the two district councils, neither of which is a highway authority, that the latest modelling results have already reached a conclusion, and this was signed in February or March, I think, or possibly December of last year, but before submission anyway. I can't immediately see the timeline on this copy, and it is apparently agreed between the two councils on that basis that the core strategy review will have a negligible impact on highway capacity and air quality within the City Council's area. Now, it's not my case that there is a case for air quality in particular, but I think there is a prima facie case that there is a highway capacity issue. And I think I gather from what Mr. Hogben has just said that there is further work going on. He's referred to the fact that there is an outline application for 85% of Otterpool, in other words, 8,500 dwellings, which is before the district council at the moment as an outline application. But the core strategy seeks to allocate 10,000 dwellings in that area. So at the point of submission, the full evidence of the traffic impact on the junction did not seem to be available, but what evidence was available did demonstrate that there is an impact that needs to be addressed. And that is my concern with the cooperation, sir, between the council and the City Council in Canterbury, which purports to be agreeing that there is no impact. In fact, there is a negligible impact, which is not the normal terminology to be used, particularly when the full evidence is not available. The traffic surveys were done in 2014, and there was an attempt to update them in 2018, which was not done at a time compliant with the DMRB. It was done in the week before Easter, and there was a need for further evidence to come forward. So what I would seek is that you follow, sir, the Statement of Common Ground with the County Council, that issues need to be identified and, where appropriate, mitigated as sites come forward, and not the approach advocated by the City Council that there is apparently a negligible impact and nothing needs to be done and it's all clear and fine and there is no problem. So that, sir, is the background to why I will be seeking changes to some of the policies when we get to detailed sessions, which are not for today. But for today, suffice to say that I would ask you, sir, to follow the County Council's approach on highway matters rather than the City Council's approach. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you. Can I bring, first of all, someone from the District Council into this at this point? I suppose again, being careful not to step into the realms of a planning application and stick with the core strategy review itself. But in terms of the anticipated course of events from the council's point of view, how far have you gone down the road of confirming what impacts there would be as far as highway capacity, etc., are concerned, and to what extent are you envisaging such matters to be dealt with at a detailed stage in terms of planning applications? Perhaps Mr. Hammond can come in there. Yep.
Yes, thank you, sir. So the core strategy review sets the spatial framework for the District Council, and as Mr. Baker has alluded to, there are policies in there that the County Council are supportive of in relation to mitigation. In regards to the specific impact in Canterbury, the two exercises were not done in isolation. So the County Council were part of the overall local plan highway assessment as informed by ACOM. And when Canterbury City Council raised the matter of the impact on the road network in Canterbury, equally it wasn't done as an exercise between just Canterbury and Folkestone and Hythe District Council. It involved the input of the County Council. So the two exercises was a commonality between the two. We weren't looking to decouple the two exercises.
So as far as the particular concern that Mr. Baker has about that particular junction, I note he has concerns about the evidence which has led to those conclusions. But in terms of the practicality of a proposal coming forward at a detailed stage, is that within the scope of an issue that can be dealt with, or is it something that necessarily needs to be dealt with at the plan making stage, as you see it?
Yes, thank you, sir. So the plan making stage sets the framework. So it allows for the District Council to seek contributions for off-site mitigation as they see fit. If the County Council were to include any number of off-site junctions, the detail of that would come forward by the planning application. It's not for me to say on behalf of the County Council as the local highway authority as to what the expectation is for this specific junction. The County Council have reviewed the evidence put forward to examination by Mr. Baker. They're fully cognizant of the associated impact from arising from the garden assessment, and their view is that the impact is not of a scale to warrant direct mitigation from the garden assessment. Notwithstanding that, there is a junction improvement before the County Council in relation to a large-scale site in Canterbury District itself. The point I make is Mr. Baker's evidence questions the validity of that individual scheme coming forward, and I've been informed this morning that it's going to planning committee next week. The scheme in question is Mountfield Park. The point to make, sir, is that the County Council is aware of a scheme of improvement. They don't feel that there's reason under the Regulation 122 under a planning application to seek a contribution from Otterpool, but they do have a solution that would mitigate the impact arising on that part of the network. So the County Council are agreeable that if Mountfield Park doesn't come forward, that they would look to either implement the same scheme through collecting Section 106 locally, or otherwise implement spend as sill. So I think Mr. Baker's evidence points to ultimately he feels that there should be a commitment to delivering a scheme of improvement at Nackington Road Junction. The County Council is fully conversant of what that scheme might look like. it is in their powers as the highway authority to determine what triggers that impact and what schemes should contribute towards it. And they feel that Ospel Park should not be part of that equation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hogben, can I just ask you to come in and clarify or otherwise that situation?
Yes, thank you, sir. I'd just like to reiterate Mr. Hammond's comments that he's just made in respect to this matter. I'll give you a bit of background about the Mountfield Park site in Canterbury. The planning application was submitted for this site back in 2016 and did go to planning committee in 2017. It was deferred because a judicial review was sought on this site on air quality grounds, but the JR has now failed. So officers at Canterbury City Council are now looking at proceeding to taking this site back to planning committee next week. The site is in Canterbury's local plan, obviously, so is required in terms of their housing numbers. So the County Council is very confident this site will come forward in the next few years and deliver the junction improvements at the junction of Nackington Road and Old Dover Road. Related to that is a junction improvement at the junction to the west, which is St Lawrence Road, the Drive and Old Dover Road. They will provide a substantial highway capacity upgrade along the Old Dover Road corridor. And that will be delivered fairly early on within the first phase of the development at about 1,600 units. So that should happen probably within the next 5 to 6 years, based on a build out of about 300 dwellings a year. Thank you, sir. Okay,
just if you could just stay on there, Mr. Hogben. I suppose that one of the key concerns that's been raised is that what if the Mountfield Park development doesn't come forward, or certainly doesn't come forward on the timescale it's envisaged. From the County Council's perspective, is there an alternative way of achieving improvements that need to be achieved?
Yes, so we've had to consider what the impact of the Ospel Park site is at the end of the core strategy review, i.e. 2037. Yeah. So we've had a look at the submitted transport assessment for the Ospel Park site, and it predicts a total of 27 movements on the junction and the AM peak and 29 movements on the junction and the PM peak. Obviously, this equates to less than one movement every 2 minutes. In terms of percentage terms, as the impact on the junction, it works at about approximately 3%. So in the County Council's mind, it isn't a significant impact on the junction, for example, than what the Mountfield Park site would have. So in my mind, personally, there's not a severe impact. That's one of the key terms of the MPPF in terms of assessment as to the traffic impact of the Ospel Park site on this junction. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baker, is there anything you wish to respond to there?
Thanks, sir. Much of what has been said, sir, I don't disagree with, and it is right that the City Council has proposed to report this matter to its planning committee next week. This will be for the second time, but my concern is that when the duty to cooperate common ground work was done, the site, although it had the benefit of a resolution to grant planning permission previously, had not made progress towards an actual planning permission, and in fact the City Council had undertaken to the Court of Appeal that it would bring it back to planning committee, and as we stand, it doesn't have a decision as of next week. The Mountfield Park scheme, as you rightly said, sir, may not come forward at all, or to the timescale that is suggested in the modelling, and therefore it may fail to deliver the impact. I would respectfully suggest, sir, that a 3% impact on a junction that is already at the absolute limit of its capacity is something that should be looked at critically, and is, as far as I'm aware, not yet modelled in the evidence with the full impact of Otterpool Park, for the reason I stated earlier, namely that the transport assessment doesn't assess the full allocation, as I understand it. It may be that there is more up-to-date evidence on the full impact of the allocation, rather than the planning application, but I'm afraid I'm not aware of where that is. To conclude, sir, I would say that I welcome the County Council's willingness to consider the need for enhancements to that junction if justified, and that will not be finally resolved here because it will depend on final modelling. But my concern is that the policies that are in the core strategy review are not currently lined up with that aim, and in that respect the duty to cooperate has not fed through into the wording of policy SS5, which refers only to requiring development to provide, contribute to or address the district's current and future infrastructure needs. That on its face would not allow the consideration of extra district effects in other areas. And I do note that the District Council has agreed to include in its statement of common ground with Ashford Borough Council, has agreed to include some wording in policy SS7 relating to outside district effects. But those words are fine, but they conflict with what is in SS5. And that is why, sir, I say that SS5 needs to be reflective of the approach that the County Council has outlined, which, as you will have heard this morning, does not limit the impact of development and the assessment of its impact to the district boundaries, and that is clearly right. There should not be an artificial limitation on infrastructure to district boundaries, and if it is justified to deal with an impact elsewhere, then that should be permitted within the policies without being ruled out. So ultimately, sir, I think the core strategy is going in the right direction with the amendments to SS7, but those need to be reflected in SS5. And I don't see that the points that have been made by the County Council have been reflected by the District Council in SS5, sir. Thank you, sir. I hope that's clear, but I'll be happy to expand further if it's not.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Okay. Again, as with many things we've discussed this morning, it's an issue that we will be coming back to when we look at the particular proposal and indeed policies generally in the core strategy review at later sessions. But thank you for that. Okay. I think that's from my perspective covers the ground that we needed to cover. From the participants today, are there any additional points that any of you wish to make that we haven't heard already as far as the duty to cooperate is concerned before we look to bring this particular session to a close? Mr. Horner.
Not from, sorry.
Right. Yep.
Just
Mr.
briefly,
Horner.
sir, I'll just come back and thank Mr. Hammond for pointing me to the correct document earlier. I think my confusion arose from the fact that the statement of common ground was indeed apparently signed at the end of 2019, but according to document EB 180, there'd been no meetings with Affinity Water for the previous 2 years. That was the point that was confusing me at the time, but it looks as though proper procedure has been followed. Thank you.
Thank you. You found the right document and you've seen the table we were referring to.
Oh yeah, yes, he pointed me straight to it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any final points from anyone else before we draw the session to a close?
No, thank you, sir.
No. Okay, good. Thank you. That's been very useful. The session is now joined to a close. So we'll take a break. At least some of us will be resuming again for matter 3 this afternoon, which starts at 2 o'clock promptly.